everybody, and welcome to LAGBAC's Corporate Counsel Committee's webinar today for titled Breaking In and Moving Up, Resume Building for In-House Counsel. My name is Jeremy Gray, and I am the chair of LAGBAC's Corporate Counsel Committee. And with me here today is Mindy Sircus, and we're very honored to have her here. She is the managing director in Major Lindsey Africa's in-house practice group. Mindy has nearly 20 years of experience as an executive recruiter in the legal industry, where she works closely with corporate legal departments and in-house candidates. She provides strategic career guidance to attorneys at all levels, from general counsel to staff attorneys. A little bit about Mindy. Before joining Major Lindsey Africa, she spent 17 years as a legal recruiter with Zenner Consulting Group in Chicago, specializing in both law firm and in-house placements. And before that, Mindy started her legal career as an associate at Arnold and Porter in DC, and then moved back to her hometown of Chicago, where she was a partner at Neil Gerber Eisenberg. And I want to thank you, Mindy, so much for being here with us today and offering both your time and your knowledge, and to provide some insight into how an attorney can best present themselves on one of the first ways that candidates are introduced to a prospective employer. And for everybody's edification, having spoken with Mindy several times over the last few months in preparation for this webinar, I think that all of you should walk away with some really great insight and some practical tips. Now, without further ado, I want to start off with a few just little tips for everybody. As we go through the webinar, there is a Q&A and a chat function available to you. Please feel free to submit questions in writing in the Q&A. And if you would like to ask your question orally or out loud, please message Stacy Zoller, who's one of the hosts of the meeting, and she can help to unmute you so you can ask questions. We really would like this to be a collaborative experience where people are able to ask questions and really be able to pick Mindy's mind for all the great knowledge that she has. And with that, I'm actually now going to share my screen, which has some of the materials. And just for everybody that's joining us today, when you logged in, there was a link to samples that were available. So please do, you can click and download those, which will be some of the materials we'll be looking at today. So Mindy, thank you so much once again. I'll share my screen and I'll turn it over to you. But I think to start off today, there was a couple questions that I had just to kind of begin this all. Could you tell everybody what the current status of the in-house legal market is?
Absolutely. First and foremost, Jeremy and LAGBAC, thank you for having me here. I have to say, watching the video, and I understand that's an updated presentation, moved me to tears. I am while I'm a cisgender Jewish woman, I do have a gay son. And so the message of safe, welcoming, and empowering is how I try to live my life, and both on a personal basis and a professional basis. So that helps, I think, explain why I'm here, why I'm moved, and hopefully everybody will walk away with some practical tips. That's really what we're trying to get here, but also want to answer your questions. So thank you again. Now, I did hear your question, but I did want to get that in and just say thank you again for having me. The state of the market is crazy. It is crazy busy right now. Having come off, well, I can't say come off, there's optimism in the air, right? There are shots being given. We're moving in a positive direction in so many ways, and the economy is regenerating, reviving. And we're seeing a very, very active market. Now that means it's active in certain sectors. It's active both in terms of industry and specialty wise. And that means that both employers can be very selective and candidates can be selective, and hopefully the matches align.
Well, that's good to know. And I guess the kind of, in that same vein, is what is the best time really then for an attorney that's looking to go in-house to start looking for that new position or start to make that decision?
I think any time from sort of year 2 at a firm on, somebody should keep their eyes and ears open. Now, of course, if you hear from an employer or a networking contact or a friend that there's another opportunity before that 2-year mark, great. Always be open, listening to opportunities, however they come your way, whether it's friends, professional contacts, whether you see something on LinkedIn. That's taking care of yourself to investigate. It's market information for you, so be open to it.
Well, Mindy, I know that you provided to us a presentation. I'm going to start sharing that presentation. And one of the things that I thought, was really useful, and I'm glad that you pulled this together, was some sample resumes or some exemplar resumes that I think will help illustrate a lot of the discussion that you want to have today. So I'm going to go ahead and share it. I hope everybody can see it. And we're going to start off by looking at the resume for Bob Loblaw, and I will zoom in to make it a little bit easier for everybody to see.
Awesome.
And could you just kind of give us a background of like what this resume is, what this person, their background was and what they're trying to do?
So this person is clearly a restructuring bankruptcy lawyer. That's been their focus since having been a general litigation associate at a small litigation boutique. And then as they moved up the career chain or ladder, they focused on bankruptcy. And, that's probably a function of the market too, right? In terms of timing, bankruptcy ebbs and flows and becomes hotter, and it's an area into which litigation and sometimes corporate attorneys can move in. I saw that a lot actually in 2007 in the downturn. A lot of corporate lawyers, when corporate deals dried up, you switch your skills. If you can put a deal together, you can usually take it apart and reframe it, restructure it. So that's what Bob's career is. And I'd like to, before I show you sort of how I typically look at a resume, I'd like to just point out, and it's highlighted, if any of you still have sbcglobal.net emails, please change them, okay? I will affirm that I have a Yahoo one. That's an admission, but I am moving to Gmail. So your email address can date you a little bit and can give a clue. So that's just a small tip. Then just, Jeremy, I'm going to ask you to go actually to the very bottom of Bob's resume on his memberships. Because I think as a starting point too, just as the video started and we talked about safe welcoming. So here in this example, Bob is a member of LAGBAC's CLE programming committee. And that goes to the very question of, should you identify, should you put your LAGBAC membership, should you put a Lambda Legal affiliation on your resume? And that really is such a personal question. It's a question of personal comfort. I think in this day and age, as diverse D&I, DE&I, however one wants to phrase it, initiatives are becoming more and more de rigueur. I would hope that individuals might feel safer. It's also going to be an important question that you'll have going through any interviewing process, right? Is to find out what the particular firm or organization or company has available and what type of inclusivity is their corporate culture. Do they have ERGs? Do they have, what are their benefit policies? Do they do, I'm trying to remember the correct terminology right now. Is gender affirmation surgery covered? whether or not that's applicable to you, those are signals that the company or the firm is sending. And it's obviously not something to address in an initial interview, but this is a way to just get the conversation started if you're comfortable. So that's why I wanted to point that out. Okay, let's go back to Bob's to the top to his objective. And I have heard, I think, from several general counsels, and I think it's an interesting perspective. If you're a firm lawyer looking to move in-house, from these general counsel perspectives is if you can't sell yourself to a prospective employer in a brief amount of time, how will you be able to sell an idea or a concept or a strategy to the in-house business people who are not going to want to look at a 20-page law firm memo? They're going to want a four-paragraph, potentially, maybe sometimes 4-sentence, saying, here are the risks, here's what I recommend. So you have to be able to sell yourself. So I think Bob's objective is actually pretty good, except that when he says it would allow me to leverage, moving in-house is not about what it does for you. Sorry to throw cold water on your parade. This is about, and this process should be about in your mind, how you can plug and play into the corporation's needs and what you are bringing to the corporation to help them. That's why I highlighted that phrase.
And in some ways, this also goes to even the interview process of having your elevator pitch ready for yourself. And this is effectively a short version of your elevator pitch. Is that effectively right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree 100% on that. And Bob does a pretty good job. He's trying to stress a full range of litigation, corporate, financial restructuring. That is how I think that bankruptcy lawyers tend to look at themselves. And as I said, in downturn times or in fuller times, having corporate skills is helpful. So I think that's why you'll see that pin there a lot. Then I also highlighted, moving in-house as a litigator, that's something you also have to be ready to reframe. You won't generally be the hands-on litigator when you move in-house. It's more often a litigation management and oversight. So you have to be prepared to think about what the difference is in your daily life and how you've done that already. And then I think he did a nice job stressing other areas, intellectual property and licensing, environmental, trying to be as broad as possible. And that, while it doesn't identify different industries, it could be a platform for getting into different industries who have different concerns. Moving on, this is just a little nit on my part. Never call it just experience, okay? Or work history. This is professional experience. You are lawyers, you've been lawyers. It's a profession, continues to be, and that heightens it a little. So that's what I would have added there. Then on his large international firm, the intro here is somewhat repetitive of the bullets that he's got down below. And a favor that I would ask of all of you is to keep in mind that there are still human readers of resumes. And this is my tip, okay? The human reader gets very tired if it's a long block paragraph, and we're going to see that on the next resume. I think Bob did a great job of what I call road mapping your resume. These bullets with bolded text of specific areas of expertise are a great way for someone who's reviewing a resume, who's got maybe a checklist of 10 qualities they're looking for, to say, you know what, Bob's got 7 of them. I'm going to advance him, as opposed to having to read and slog through a block paragraph and have to decipher what those skills are. So that's really, really helpful. I like that for, and we've started with a bankruptcy litigator resume. For the people who are attending or listening who are corporate lawyers, frankly, I think this road mapping is a little bit easier on the corporate side of the house, right? You can do M&A transactions, you can do corporate governance and securities, commercial agreements. Those are a little easier to tease out of your practice than litigation, and that's why we chose this resume to help give litigators and people more on that side of the practice a bit more clues. So I hope that's helpful. Now, one thing, so in the deal structuring bullet, this is where, again, I'm trying to ask you to be a reader and to be conscious of it. If you read your resume out loud to yourself, you'll hear handled all aspects of the related capital structure analysis of. I never like repetition, and that can also come into play in a corporate lawyer's if you say commercial agreements, license agreements, lease agreements, non-disclosure agreements. The repetition of the word agreements is superfluous. It slows the reader down. Find a way to make a list of non-disclosure, lease, employment, and purchase agreements. You do it in your drafting all the time, do it in your resume as well.
So it really comes down to the readability aspect because it's not necessarily going to be an attorney that's even looking at your resume at the first instance. So it's understanding, multiple audiences that may be looking at it. Is that effectively where this is going?
Yes. And I think it also goes to the point of trying to get as much relevant information in as opposed to every single detail, and being trim, concise. I'm doing a general counsel search right now, and someone sent in a 6.5-page resume. Now, that's great, and people have long careers and they've accomplished a lot. 6.5 pages is way too long. So read it, strike where you can, be concise, tell me what's really important. And by repeating words, you're not, it's not helping the case to me. Sorry, I'm really direct on these things, so I'm teeing it right back to you, Jeremy.
I think the directness makes everybody's writing better. So,
and then corporate finance, I thought was, again, what Bob is doing here is he is teasing out the broadest possible parameters of his practice and thinking about how to cast it broadly, right? Because frankly, moving in-house as a restructuring lawyer, that's not generally something in-house teams look for, right? People don't anticipate that they're going to go into bankruptcy. This is an expertise usually reserved for outside counsel that you'd hire. So by broadening these points, he is trying to make himself as marketable as possible and giving himself as many platforms from which to hop into the in-house realm. So corporate finance is helpful. Then in the bankruptcy auction and bankruptcy litigation, I liked his verbs. I liked guided and protected. It really distinguishes oneself as opposed to continually saying represented, represented, represented. Again, think about the reader, think about being in a conversation about this document and trying to make it engaging. While the bankruptcy litigation bullet is a little long with the second sentence, I actually think that is really, that's an accomplishment, right? That is a way, secured dismissal of bankruptcy is bad faith filing. So that might have been a strategic, that tells you about the strategic direction chosen. And then the sanctions that were obtained, and maybe it goes beyond a usual case to have the sanctions go against the principal and the counsel as well. And then the amount of attorney fees and legal costs. So many times I read resumes where it's like 65 million here, 55 billion here. At a certain point, we all know as practitioners, the dollar amounts don't necessarily matter. They may make it sexier, but it's the result that you obtained and for the client. So that's why I thought that was a really effective bullet. It didn't matter what the dollars were. The civic bullet that he's got, I think really could go into a different bullet down below as almost a separate civic engagement, community involvement, pro bono involvement. And that might be a place you want to put your LAGBAC committee participation if you so choose. Then we see he came from a middle market regional firm, and this is where he got a little detailed with the courts, and that could or could not matter. It depends on, you know, in IP, if you're bringing cases to the rocket docket, that matters. Bankruptcy, I don't know enough to know if these are specific venues that are of prominence. I've just been a bit away from law firm work for a bit. Then here, where he put the dollar range, I thought that was interesting. And then while it's not highlighted, he really could have set out as a different bullet the industries that he's represented. Because again, you're looking for a platform, you're looking for a nexus to connect to the in-house dream. So any industry work you've done is a good place to highlight. In the continuing on the middle market firm, he does a good job of showing all the different types of representations he's done, again, with highlighting different industries, a dollar range, you know, creditors committee, and then firm leadership, again, could be a place, if you're a member of an ERG, think about putting that there. Now, the small litigation boutique for Bob, I did have to laugh a little. I like that he says he engaged in motion practice. You know, there is a wide variety of motion practice, and what you want to highlight here is the highest level of that. So really, what dispositive motions has he argued? How many witnesses has he taken and defended? Excuse me, does that include experts? So I thought there could have been a little more specificity on that. And the reason I chuckled is as a 1, 2, or 3 year associate under both bullets successfully defended patent infringement lawsuit. I don't think that Bob was the one leading the charge on that. I just am going to say, and that would be something I would question him about. He's a junior associate. No offense to the junior associates here present and thinking about it, but just trying to think about the reality of where you are on the pecking order. And the same for the RICO and conspiracy trial. So that takes care of Bob.
So on the issue of the small litigation boutique part of Bob's resume, and I guess this is a larger point that I've heard you talk about, which is you want to make sure that everything you say is defensible, and you don't want them to think that you're overselling, or so it's almost like an odd balance between oversell and undersell.
It's definitely a very fine line, but you want to be truthful. You know, what he could have said is member of trial team that successfully defended. Or you could, I think that's probably the closest. And then again, if he took an expert witness, if he did a cross-examination, but otherwise, depending on now, and one could argue, now I start going in my head, but he's at a small litigation boutique, so they probably staff pretty leanly. It could be a partner in him, but I think then you would say together with partner successfully defended, or member of second chair on two-person trial team. There's a way to do it, but I probably would poke at him in an interview. I wouldn't ding him for this, um, obviously, but it's a question that would be raised.
So what is one of the biggest mistakes? So here we're looking at somebody who has been in a firm, wants to transition into in-house. What is one of the biggest mistakes that an in-firm lawyer makes when seeking to go in-house with their resume?
Uh, I think it's not thinking about it from the business perspective. I think you want to try to think about, remember we talked about plug and play for the corporation at the beginning. Take a look at whatever job spec you have, or if you see a role posted, look at the keywords. Try it. I know it's effort. I know all of us dread the idea of what do you mean I have to have a resume for each job that I'm seeking? But as much as you can tailor it to the role, the more effective you will be. And just on a related point, should you, once you get into um, the interview process, keep that in mind that this is about your skills. What skills do you have that are applicable to the role? And if here, a much better answer than Bob saying, I just successfully defended this patent infringement suit. If he's asked about, well, have you handled an employment discrimination case? The answer here, I'm going to assume, is no. And so, but the better answer is to say, no, but let me tell you about a time that I got put on a patent infringement suit. I wasn't trained as a patent lawyer. It was the first case I ever had. I didn't know anything about patents. And I got up to speed so quickly that the partner leading the team had me do a cross-examination. You want to find analogies as best you can without stretching the truth.
There's a question that came in from one of the participants, and I think it's a really good question as well, is looking at Bob's resume, he has, experience dating back to the mid 90s in this case. Um, Given the age of like this small litigation boutique and stuff like that, is there a rule of thumb or any guidance you would provide on, when is experience so old that you would not include detail about it, or do you always want to include some detail?
Great question. I personally like to see at least the places someone has worked. You don't want there to be gaps because, and this might go to another question that someone might have down the line about at what point does one stop giving their graduation year, etc. And just know you may not put it down on the resume, but believe me, anybody who's looking at the resume is going to try and hunt it down. So people will figure it out. I believe in being straightforward about that too. And I just don't like to see gaps, or I like to understand why the gaps are. Maybe someone lost their job at the beginning of the pandemic, and let's say this is 5 years down the line, but let's say at the beginning, February 2020, they lost their job and did not find one till May of 2021. There was a pandemic going on and there was a downturn in the economy before then. So as long as the story makes sense, and again, by story, I don't mean fabrication, I just mean a real relaying of the facts, people will understand that. So you can abbreviate experience as you go on. It may be that at this point in time, Bob doesn't need to have the bullets explaining what he did at the small litigation boutique. He could just have one extended sentence sort of talking about including variety of complex commercial litigation matters, including patent infringement, antitrust, RICO conspiracy.
Good.
I hope that's helpful.
I think that's very helpful. And I had another question as it relates to, below we see, discussion of the education, and you were just talking about, do you put the dates on there? How much detail, like here, Bob has put forward, he's on an academic merit scholarship, legal aid clinic. How important are those kind of details?
those do diminish over time, and including the state university now, his minors. I always find it interesting when someone has studied philosophy. I got to tell you, philosophy gets me talking. A music performance gets me talking. So it's just really interesting to me. But over time, those are less and less important. And those, by abbreviating those, you can free up more room to talk about your more relevant experience. One other point that I think it's not on here. Poor Bob did not make Dean's List, but I'll tell you, my personal preference is not to put Dean's List down unless you are on it every single semester, or tell me Dean's List 6 out of 8 semesters, Dean Honor Roll 4 out of 6 semesters, whatever it is. But to just say Dean's List is one of those, like, you could be putting it on for 1 semester, or it could be all 8.
Okay. And here there's also, you've highlighted the admissions. Is it important to include your admissions on your resume?
I think the reason I highlighted it, I think that's more important, frankly, for litigators at firms. I think it's going to be less, again, going to the point, if you're moving in-house as a litigator, you're not really going to be the one going to court and arguing. So that's less and less important. And that does free up space.
Okay. Do you want to transition now? We're about a little past our midpoint. The second resume that you provided was somebody who had been in-house and is now looking to transition to another role within in-house.
Yes.
And this is Jennifer Jones.
Yes. And I'll just tell you all right now that Bob's resume is better than Jennifer's. So, and you probably can already see why. Just looking at it visually. Now, it's not that it's 3 pages. That doesn't bother me much, but I wouldn't go much beyond 3. But as you can see, she does not have the bullets like she does not have the roadmap like Bob does. And that means I've got to read every single paragraph and every single word. So I'm already a little tired about that. But let's see, because she has a lot of experience to offer. And frankly, she starts with that point, right? So her elevator pitch starts with experienced attorney. And I think that while that could be the case, she's missing the opportunity to stress that she was an equity partner and a chair of a practice group at a large international law firm. You don't need all that up front, but what I usually do for that is to stress, she might want to say big law equity partner, former big law. Frankly, what she should do, is start with her general counselship, right? So say general counsel, big firm trained, attorney. The more than 25 years, that does go to sort of when we put years on, et cetera. I'm going to be able to count those years. I don't know that you need the tenure if you're giving the titles, because the titles convey more of the detail of the success she's had over those 25 years as opposed to the pure time frame. And the pure time frame could hurt her. So I think that's how I would change that. I like her that she's trying to gain to let us know that she has advised CEOs, boards, senior executives. That means she's a really key team player, and that's really helpful. Then she starts bleeding a little bit into too many interest groups, I think. The lenders, the shareholders, credit, it's just too much for this. If she's been in the GC seat, she's had those conversations and will know it. It's just upfront. I don't think she needed to say that. The operations, acquisitions, she could just say all significant legal matters, right? And then in the more of the meat of the resume, highlight those aspects. So then she did listen to me, and she did use professional experience. So points to Jennifer on that. And then just
Gmail, and she's got a Gmail as well.
yes,
So
yes, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. So then we go, and her description, it's helpful here once you do get in-house, because not everybody will know every single company. I do like that she's told us what the business does. I think she's slightly repetitive, saying full service turnkey. But other than, and also the real estate, architecture, engineering, design, but construction, there's probably a way to be a little more concise on that. But the $2 billion in revenue here and the more than 2,000 employees does give you a context of the scope of her role and the scope of the organization, and that is helpful. And again, you see this second sentence is somewhat repetitive of the opener. So I think she should just have it one place or the other. And then on as we go into her bullets, let me give you some ideas, and you can read along. I won't read them out loud because again, you'll all fall asleep. But the first bullet, what she's really talking about is her executive team membership, right? She is at the table, and that is for someone in-house or who wants to go in-house, that's probably the ultimate goal. That's a question I get every time when there's a senior leadership role up. People want to know, will I be at the table? Will I be part of the discussion with the CEO, the CFO, the CHRO? That's usually the core. If there's a little bit more, maybe that's where you ultimately want to be. So that I think could be her caption for that. What we don't have here, she is either a legal team of one or she leads a legal team, and we have no idea about that. It's helpful to know either way. If you're a team of one, that tells me as a recruiter, you roll up your sleeves. You are doing everything, because face it, no company has a budget for outside legal spend to cover everything that they need covered. That's why there's an in-house counsel. So that demonstrates a roll up your sleeves, get in the trenches grit that we like to see. But on the other hand, if she's managing, she still may be rolling up her sleeves, but that also tells me she's got management skills. And it tells me about, has she been able to build a team, develop a team? How does she go about doing that? That can be important for how collaborative she is, how transparent she is, and how supportive. So I think that was something she missed. The second bullet really is about sort of the company's innovation enterprises. There's sort of two pieces. There's an innovation piece, and then there's a corporate formation piece. I think she should sort of pull out the corporate formations. The innovations is good. People want to know the GC is going to be strategic, creative, innovative, and contributes to these. And how do you demonstrate that? If you help structure a deal, if you help craft a creative solution out of a legal issue. And then the corporate formation really can go down a little bit lower. That's sort of more of a building block. The third bullet is about corporate governance, but remember, she's in a private company. Corporate governance is still important, and the fact that she helps with filings for public affiliated entities is a good segue and a good bridge that she can use to cross if she wants to go to a public company, and that might ultimately be her goal. And I would say, going back to the litigators in the group and Bob, once you get in-house, that's a good way to look around and expand your portfolio beyond litigation matters. Can you befriend someone on the commercial team and start looking at commercial agreements? I'm working with a candidate right now who had no securities experience, but was at a public company, knew they wanted to have that experience, have that arrow in their quiver, and made a deal with the CFO and said, you know what, I want to read your filings on my own time. All I ask is that and I'll help you in any way I can. I'll give you, free time to help you do whatever copies or track changes, etc. But send me your red lines, and then can we talk about it once a month to help me learn about the thought process in these SEC filings. This person ended up with a role as an SEC and governance person when someone went out on maternity, and then actually had that in their portfolio. So always look around and see how you can expand your skills.
So it seems to be like a lot of the comments you're making here are that, you know, without the headlines and everything else, it seems almost that Jennifer Jones is unmoored to what she wants to do. While she seems to have a lot of the experience that she could put into that, but it seems unmoored to like a goal, if you may.
Unmoored and somewhat rambly. And this could translate into an interview process. If you are not concise and succinct and know specifically the answer to the question, you can come across as disorganized. I think it just helps you organize your thoughts and think about, again, how to translate it into what the next company might be looking for. Because big companies' problems are never going to be replicated at her next job. So she's going to constantly be needing to look for analogies and how to be plug and play at the next company without the specifics from big company, if that makes sense.
I think that makes perfect sense. And one of the things you hit on here was like whenever you highlighted, for example, in the third bullet point, corporate governance, that seems to be something that, in your opinion, like in your view of this, this is an important thing that she has done, and many companies would look for this. And if you can find ways to highlight that, if you're in-house currently and you want to move up, that's a good thing to highlight, for example.
Absolutely. And I think because corporate governance also signals her work with, and I don't think I see it specifically, she talked about advising the board. Knowing that she did that, she should link those two. Those are really related concepts. One could argue that subsidiary management is also part of corporate governance, but in the hierarchy of needs, that is a much lower need. So
yeah, I think one of the things you talked about was, and particularly with Jennifer Jones, is learning how to group thing like to like
yes,
to tell a compelling story.
yes. So you know what? I want to be respectful. I know we're going to come up on the end of our time. So rather than going through every grouping and heading, why don't we move to just see if there's any lessons to learn from her prior firm experience, and then we'll keep going in that way. So again, here she was an equity partner, and that means she made a big decision, right? If you're an equity partner, generally you have a book, and I'll just put that out there as sort of the ultimate question for firm lawyers who are building practices, who have practices. That tends to be your security blanket as far as moving firm to firm, or firm just the security within your own firm. But to give up those clients and move in-house, that is significant. Do not assume those clients will wait for you if going in-house doesn't work out. So you really have to be sure that you want to leave that world and move in-house. So again, I think that she could have benefited here from bullets in terms of even things like proactive client representation, right? She talks about analyzing public filings and potential causes of action. I have to tell you, I started sweating reading that as a former securities lawyer, because it's like, please don't find any of my former filings. Please let them all still be okay. No news is good news in that respect, but it made me very antsy. But I think her point there is she wants to try to show she's been strategic, she's been proactive, and she helps create these theories or identify them. And I think that's the skill there. And again, here is the board representation and securities filings. Then with her sample representations, I think this is just a little too much detail. Again, as you can see, Counsel 2, Counsel 2, Counsel 2. It just puts, it's very rhythmic, but it's going to force the reader to nod off. Group it by types of entities you represented, group it by the type of initiative, etc. And then you can see she did get, she really pared down her earlier legal career to the narrowest, skinniest pieces. And then I think her civic could have been more abbreviated. That's a little detailed, to get into protection. I'm not knocking. I believe we should save the Great Lakes and have beach safety awareness, but I think she just went into a little too much detail. I don't love how her education is set out. I like seeing the school in the left, just like I like reading the name of the employer and then your title. I like seeing the school name on the left side, your degree and date and honors on the right side. Now, I know we're getting close on time, but this is something, Jeremy, you and I talked about, is interests. It should not surprise anybody that I like to see interests. Okay, I think you're getting a flavor for my personality and see how I like to just talk off the cuff. So I'm going to give Jennifer a B+ on her interests. And why do I do that? Because she started with gardening. Okay, gardening, running, cooking, sports, reading, anything that generic, you get a ding from me. What I did like, because it's just so generic, it tells me nothing really. I did like that she said amateur painter. I consider myself a perpetual beginner at knitting. She's a beginning golfer, an intermediate skier, an avid motorcycle enthusiast. So that tells me something about her, and it gives me an entree. It gives you an entree to start having, just frame it as a conversation as opposed to just diving in full out professional. So that's what I think about interests.
Yeah, we've been seeing both of these resumes, and we as we're walking through them, is there a standardized form that people should be following for a resume?
If you're sending it to me, please send it with the headings as best you can. There's no set form, but I'm just telling you from I do think the crisper it is, the more concise, and think of it from the visual perspective. Bob's is so much better with the headings bolded and bullets. It guides the reader. The nondescript bullets that Jennifer has used is a little less standout. Now, my son and I have had debates. I happen to be a big Times New Roman fan, okay? But other people have particular fonts that they like. I think Jennifer's looks dated, and it's also very small. It might just be looking at it on the screen right now. But I think Bob's is a stronger visual statement if you compare the two, and I try to go for that. There's no one size fits all to really answer your question.
The last thing that you provided to everybody was, kind of an overview of, what you put it down as how to become a GC. And I know you talked about this was pre-pandemic, but I think the lessons still are applicable. What do you think maybe you could just walk us through, like, what do you think, people should take away from, what they need to do to get to that next step?
Got it. So if you're in a law firm and you want to move in-house, think about who you know. Think about who you can network with. That is going to be your best direct route. I'd love to say that it's going to be me to get you there, and in some instances it will, but always think about who knows your work. That is going to be the most direct route. Then, and again, once you get in-house, think about how to keep moving up the ladder. And how you do that is by creating opportunities for yourself, expand your skills, fill the holes that exist, be proactive, and that makes you visible. Now, you have to still get your own work done, but try to connect with people in outside of legal. Talk to the commercial people, learn the risk profile of the company to the best of your ability. Try to draft agreements to the best of your ability. That's the lifeblood of the organization. As I expressed about the individual who's interviewing now, if you're not a securities lawyer and you didn't train as one, first of all, kudos to you. You saved yourself a lot of headaches. But everybody can read the company's filings if it's a public company. Read those filings, understand the business, go talk to the business people, see if you can get in a little bit on that securities work. It just gives you the more options you'll have, and the greater visibility will help you climb that ladder.
Well, I think that's the end of the kind of formal part of the presentation. I did want to leave a few minutes to see if anybody had any questions for Mindy. And if you do, you can either put them in the Q&A for the chat, or you can raise your hand. I'll give everybody a couple of minutes on that.
They probably fell asleep reading Jennifer's resume, I'm just saying.
Well, I do want to, I will say this, Mindy, thank you so very much for providing your insights today. It's been, I think this has been really helpful. Whenever you and I started talking about this a few months ago, I was very excited because you do bring such knowledge just from the work that you've done over over a number of years. And I do want to tell all the people that are attending today, we are trying our best to record this. And insofar as the recording does happen, we will make it available to everybody. But do make sure that whenever you are looking at your login screen, that you do download the materials, because it may provide you some cues to look back at and understand, some of the takeaways from Mindy. Because I think, Mindy, thank you so much for highlighting it, because I think that gives people the ability to go, oh yeah, that's that phrase right there, and it does provide some good highlights. I'm not seeing any questions though, so I will tell everybody thank you so very much. It's kind of odd with these webinars; it becomes an inglorious kind of log off for everyone, but we really do appreciate everybody for participating, and thank you from LAGBAC, Mindy. This has been really great.
My pleasure.
Oh, actually, we do have one. We do have one question just came in. Sorry, and I just lost it because I turned off my thing. Yeah.
Oh, can you see it?
Yeah, so the question is, do you have any suggestions about how to find companies that are LGBTQ friendly? I've been advised that I shouldn't broadcast my lifestyle at my company.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry. Let me start with that. So I think that one way is, depending on if you're geographically focused, start and first of all, identify the potential companies where your skills would be applicable. And then you can start and go to those companies' websites and see if they have a DE&I page, okay? Or if they identify any kind of DE&I welcoming identifiers. Have they been, and have they been identified and given thumbs up by the Human Rights Campaign? That might be someplace. Where do they give their money? Are there ERGs that they publicly identify? Try to network. See if you can search on LinkedIn if you know anybody at those companies and you can who you feel comfortable asking. That's another potential way. But I hope for you that you find somewhere where you can be comfortable. Now I'm sounding like a radio host or something, but really it's coming from my Jewish mother heart and just my human heart. Just, I hope you could be comfortable and supported at work as you are at home. Everybody deserves that.
And just to help to the people that are listening, when you say ERG, what do you mean by that? Just
employee resource group, right? So there are generally forward-thinking companies and supportive companies recognize that people might want to associate with others and gain strength in that way. And so they develop ERGs to that point.
Thank you so much, Mindy, on that one. Are there any other?
Whoever is in house and they want to look for another role, feel free to call me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mindy. And once again, thank you for all the participants that logged in today. And we really appreciate all the time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.